gamers often have a tendency to hyperbolize their favorite experiences and sometimes elevate them to have like greater influence than they maybe actually did. But I've always believed with like complete sincerity that Final Fantasy VII is one of the most impactful games ever made.
An evil empire is sucking the life force from the planet, destroying all that's in its path. It's up to one soldier of fortune to save the world. If he succeeds, you survive. If he fails, you can always hit the reset button. Final Fantasy VII.
PlayStation.
We do this every couple of weeks, and I just want you to gush and tell us about your experience with Final Fantasy VII.
Like you said, kind of Final Fantasy VII had such a cultural impact, but it was also my first RPG. It was my first game where there was a story behind it. I was only 11 or 12 the first time I played, and I'd been used to Crash Bandicoot, Spyro the Dragon, Sonic the Hedgehog, stuff like that. That was what I understood video games to be. And here is this interactive, narrative where I'm controlling not just a silly wee character, who has no real depth to their persona, but an actual someone who is complex, ideas, concepts, themes that are, for me at such a formative age, I'd never encountered anywhere else before. So, Final Fantasy VII obviously tackles a few big issues. Some of it is in your face, particularly in the beginning, and some of it's pretty subtle, but
capitalism is evil.
Capitalism is evil is a mega one. The impact of capitalism and or humanity on the environment is another big one. I personally took a lot away from the game, a different worldview, particularly in terms of spirituality. I was raised a Catholic, and at that time, this is where I was kind of starting to question some of the things that I was being taught, just in the way that most kids do. Not necessarily that I was starting to rebel against it, but really just now I'm getting a bit older and seeing that there are different people from different walks of life who have different beliefs and so on and so forth. This was a sort of gateway into starting to think about all that stuff. And the concept of the live stream is something that I really, really enjoyed or really liked and felt was pretty profound in terms of, thinking about individuals and the world as energy rather than just, you're born, you die, you go to heaven type idea. That it's not strictly reincarnation, but it's a kind of form of redistribution of energy, and particularly in memories, and this idea of how you as an individual can actually impact the greater world. It was really quite profound as well. Came and slapped me in the mouth as a sort of 11-year-old, 12-year-old boy who hadn't really known anything too different before, and I wanted to sort of express how that had impacted me with others, and like I mentioned earlier on, Final Fantasy VIII came along and had a relatively similar, less profound, but a similar effect on me, and particularly in the romance side of things between Renoa and Squall. I don't know if you guys have ever sort of experienced the same thing in your life where you have something that's impacted on you and you're passionate about and you want to talk about it, but the people in your immediate circle or your family, they're not really interested. They don't want to listen about that.
That's literally what this entire show is for me.
Me too.
They don't care about table. Oh, my nephew likes tabletop, but other than him, like an RPGs, like my parents, no chance. Never played video games. My father was obsessed with columns. That's a whole other story. But yeah,
Well,
no, this allows me to talk to fantastic people like yourself, talented
Thank
writers,
you.
have these ideas that can actually share them in a meaningful way.
You know, exactly as you've said there, that and you know, it's kind of, for those of us that were around before the internet really got going, you know, we didn't have that sort of outlet. We didn't have a way to express ourselves. We didn't have a way to kind of discuss these things with like-minded individuals, or just to join a website or join a forum and actually chat about these things. Like we didn't have access to that, so it was like effectively why I started writing in the first place, and one thing led to another, and you know, particularly with the dawn of some real Final Fantasy VII forums in particular, that's where I found a lot of people who were interested in what I was doing. There has never been a period in my life since I was kind of 11 or 12 where Final Fantasy VII has not touched my life in some way, because of the investment that I've put in. Being able to now be at a position where the choices that I've made in my life and the skills that I've acquired or worked on and developed, I want to be able to continue to express how much I love the game, and I like being able to do that through social media. I like being able to do that, you know, in forums, because there are so many other people out there who feel the same way as I do about Final Fantasy VII. And then, of course, you know, we get to 2015 and the announcement of they're actually going to remake the game.
Finally, they're coming back. That was a trailer.
So we're now in a situation where not only have I continued to invest so much time and effort into how I love this game, but so many more people are going to get to experience it. But more importantly, it's now back in the forefront of so many people's minds online, that people are actively looking to discuss this. And this is
it is wild that in 2023 we're still discussing Final Fantasy VII. I feel, and this is going to sound a little dramatic, but it's almost more than just a video game. And I don't mean in the literal sense of like it's got spin-off stuff, but what, like, there's just something about this one specifically that just people just are just like attached to it in a way that just none of the other games, for as great as they are, can even come close to. Why do you think that is? Like, what is it about 7 that makes it so powerful to people?
Well, I think there are a number of different reasons. The first one is that I think certainly for those of us in the West, this was put on a platform for us in a way that video games, certainly story-driven video games, never had been before. So, this was, for many of us, our first opportunity to sort of delve into something like that. But because of how much, the Final Fantasy games, specifically from Final Fantasy IV and 6 prior to 7, they were really, really complex, or had very complex narratives. The themes in them, tackled many different things, So from that perspective, it wasn't strictly new, but what it did was it combined that narrative experience with extraordinary visuals for the time, with excellent music. Like as much as Final Fantasy the series has got some absolutely spectacular soundtracks, but I don't think too many people would argue that 7's soundtrack is outside the top 3.
It's even today, like you go into any area like Cosmo Canyon, do 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 do. Like you could play a bunch of notes, and I could play a bunch of notes. You could easily tell like that's that scene, or it's every single piece is just feels right for when it happens.
Beyond the edge of reality lies a story of ultimate conquest, a story of war and friendship, a story of a love that can never be, and a hatred that always was. And now, the most anticipated epic adventure of the year will never come to a theater near you. Final Fantasy VII.
PlayStation.
There's nothing wrong with fantasy, and it is Final Fantasy after all. But elves and orcs and what have you, it's been done 1,000 times before.
Mm-hmm.
So seeing this like location that could look like your local town, run down, the people running it don't care, you're screwed over, trying to just get by. I feel like it's something that people could relate to. I feel like it's still something that people could relate to. These teams are even more prevalent now than they were
More
when the game
now than
originally
then.
came out.
Yeah.
Tom, the thing is, though, you came into this late.
Mhm.
How do you feel about this series from what you've experienced? Do you feel any of this? Like, have you built that kind of connection with what you've experienced at this point? Do you see
not
like,
to the same depth, because I think part of what, to answer your question earlier about what made 7 so special, is you can never do it first again, and I think this had so many firsts in it. The 3D graphics as far as Final Fantasy series, and the mixing the pre-rendered environments with the polygons and all that. I think that had a big part of it. When I'm playing it, I'm trying to put myself in the frame of mind of me in 1997 playing this game and what I would have compared it to. And like the only thing in a lot of those cases, like I remember games like the point and click ones, like Full Throttle, where it was a pre-rendered environment and you had this little pixelized character running around. And that's what it reminded me of in a lot of cases, where you had an environment built and then this little polygon running in it. But that would have been so amazing then. I mean, things that were 3D rendered, it was like magic in that time frame. So I think that had a lot to do with it.
Mm-hmm.
when you continue the experience, I urge you to just take a moment and look at the location. Just like try and look at that wall in the corner or that shelf in the room, and it's still
I do that with everything anyway. Yeah.
But it still surprised me like how much detail they managed to pack into that with the 3D renders. And that's part of why, besides money, it needs to be 3 games, because that scope nowadays, the budget would be like 400 million or something.
I think it also came out at a time in sort of a transition period, and you've already touched on it, the fact that stories like this didn't exist in video games at that time, and you fast forward to today, and stories are serious and they're on par with cinematic stories and things like this. There's a goofiness and I don't know if innocence is the right word, but there's a tone to this story that doesn't really exist outside of it, I think, where there is that mix of serious and silliness in a way that's not, it's not a spoof and it's not a comedy and it's not a gritty, grimy, serious thing. It's got a little bit of all of that, but it's just this kind of weird, I don't know, just it's a mix.
I think would be the right word.
Yeah, there's an absurdity to it that I don't think you can really get away with anymore if you tried to write a story just like that.
When you make, they actually said that themselves a few years back. I don't remember exactly where the review was, but they said it was built with a certain degree of punk naivete that they're not entirely sure they would even be able to do nowadays. Like, because they were just like, let's just do it. Let's just have a marketplace with a which was back then essentially a whorehouse. Now it's more of like a cabaret, like burlesque, like culture of like individuality and queer expression, which best glow up ever, by the way. I love what they did with that in the remake, but there's a lot of darkness in that story. Like once you get further, there's stuff there that I still haven't seen again, like PTSD. Bit personal here, something I've actually dealt with. or still deal with nowadays, and especially with Remake, the way they've actually handled Cloud, like what he's experienced. You start this game thinking he's just a complete jackass. Like, this dude's lame. But you quickly find out like that goes away within like the first two or 3 hours, and you start realizing there's so much more going on in this guy's head. And you never realize like this dude is literally just trying to recover from trauma that he went through a decade ago, and everybody in that story as well has lost something. This is only something I didn't even pick up on until recently. The entire story is about every character loses something, and they have to try to accept that they can't necessarily get it back.
Absolutely, it's very specific. You're right that almost every single character is either orphaned or has lost a parent or a loved one, and a lot of the story is about dealing with grief.
Yep.
And it's not obvious if you're playing it as a child, but the older you get and the more experience you have with life, every time you go back and play the game, you can find something else about this is what they're going for. And I agree that there are many how they have explored Cloud's mental health in particular in Remake is very well done. Remake itself, I love it to pieces, and I even now have a couple of questions about whether things are the specific choices that have been made are to do with unraveling Cloud, or if it's. I don't think these things are an oversight, but I'm curious to know if it's trying to unravel Cloud. No, I'll give you an example. Like looking at Cloud's PTSD, and the first time it really emerges on screen is after the bombing of the macro reactor 1 and the highway collapses. Cloud, when he sees the fire in the windows, he finds himself in his mind back in Nibelheim. So we know then that fire is a real trigger for him, and sort of
and they don't really show that in the original, but
they don't at all. But one of the things that they have done in Remake is that in the original game, when you first start playing the game, the materia that Cloud has on him is ice and thunder.
Interesting.
But in Remake, it's not the first or the materia that Cloud has in his possession when he gets off the train is fire.
Yes.
And it's the same thing in narratively. The first summon that is given to Cloud is Ifrit, the summon of fire. So then it begins to almost subconsciously be like, well, if fire is what's triggering his PTSD, why is he in the possession of these fire items?
Because he's trying to face it, I guess. Like, he's like, what's your
potentially another my take on it is that further down the line, when they start to question Cloud's identity and whether or not he was actually present in Nibelheim, that might be something that they've already planted that seed of why is he sort of fine with some fire items but not with others?
Not others.
But I totally digress. But the point of that was that there's a specific choice being made there, and it's kind of raised a few questions. But in general, I totally agree that how they've addressed mental health in particular in Remake is excellent. Yeah.
It's so specific, it can't just be an accident.
Maybe he's literally carrying his trauma with him.
I can speak for that one. Like, with a lot of people, it's just something that like sits on your shoulders. You don't necessarily stop yourself from being around it. Like, and generally the way that most people work, even in their own head, to not overcome it but come to terms with it, is to face it directly, and that could be his own way of trying to not allowing it to dictate his entire life.
Absolutely. And
Final
another
Fantasy VII's
example,
amazing.
yeah, it is like Cloud himself is he has amnesia for the last 5 years. So technically speaking, where he is mentally is actually a 16-year-old boy who's just lost his mother. So that's who he is as a person when he actually starts the game. So to have the orphanage, the Leaf House in Sector 5 actually start to play quite an important role, and his kind of coming and goings with Aerith and later with Biggs as well. This is again setting this scene of the kind of relationship with his mother, because the same thing happened with Tifa, similar things happened with Barrett. Marlene, that's where the relationship between Barrett and Marlene is. Aerith, obviously, very famously, her parents, like the story of how she came to be with Elmira is to do with loss of parents as well. Sephiroth as well. So all these things on the surface seem like excellent little additions to the story, but when you start to delve deeper into,
There's a lot more going on.
So much more going on, and that, yeah, again, that's one of the reasons that I love Final Fantasy VII. I love Nojima's writing in particular. One of his key strengths is really getting to the nitty gritty of day-to-day living, and how trauma affects people and how they sort of deal with their grief. So, really interesting.
You're bringing up points here that, like, I've never even considered. We're gonna have to wrap this up, but final thoughts on Final Fantasy VII?
I look forward to finishing it. Every time I feel like I kind of know what this game is about, another layer gets peeled back, or it opens up to a larger world, and it's like, oh my gosh, I'm just starting.
It's the biggest onion you've ever seen.
Yeah. Right.
Gallagher, closing thoughts, Final Fantasy VII.
I'm, like I said, it's been a mega passion of mine for the last 25 years. I would like more of the same. I'm so excited about Rebirth. I'm so excited about Part 3, and just the universe in general. It's allowed me to sort of take what I love about it and what I love in my own private life in terms of history and mythology, and actually, carve out a little niche area within the community. And obviously some of the things we've touched on already in this discussion about perhaps elements of the game that would not even considered. That's the point of my mythology books, to actually present here's some ways of looking at Final Fantasy VII that perhaps you never have done before, and here's why it makes everything seem far more interesting in a different context.
Indeed. First of all, I would like you to give yourself a lot more credit. You're not just a niche in the community. One of your books literally has a foreword by the voice of Barrett Wallace. That's validation right there. Like, I'm waiting for the next book with the foreword by Matt Mercer. You have brought legitimate depth into the discussion of this world, and I'm not just saying this because you're on the show. I'm not just trying to shill for you here. I legitimately think people should check out this book. These books, especially the Final Fantasy VII ones, specifically, because they will give you a new appreciation and perspective for Final Fantasy VII. Hey there, folks. I know nobody wants to listen to a creator shill themselves for 90 seconds, so I'm not going to. If you enjoyed this, we do the show live every Sunday on Twitch at 6 p.m. BST. Feel free to pop over TNEQL. And if you would like to support us in making the channel bigger and helping it grow, you can also check us out on Patreon, also at TNEQL. Take care of yourselves. Stay beautiful.